Hey everybody, welcome to this episode of Do Good on Purpose. I'm your host, Dr. Paul Spradley, here at La Roche University. And I have such an honor to be sharing space with our special guest today, Sister Kathleen. I'm going to read your bio because you've been impressive to me since we first met. And I think everyone listening will enjoy who you are as well. So Sister Kathleen is a native of Pittsburgh, but moved to Kentucky way back in 1979, the good old days.
Yes.
You moved out there to volunteer with the Christian Appalachian Project and have been serving most of your ministry in Appalachia, serving the most vulnerable communities. And so in 1985, you joined the sisters, the Benedictine Sisters of Mount Tabor in Eastern Kentucky. And you've been doing work as a teacher for many years. You've served as a volunteer for the Laudato Si Commission, and currently are on the board for several things, including Catholic Committee of Appalachia, Our Lady of the Way Hospital, and you are still doing work to this very day in the community, very hands-on. So thanks for being on the show.
Well, thank you for having me.
How did you move into your space of becoming a sister?
Okay. That began many years ago, of course, but I felt called to do some type of ministry or volunteer work, okay? And at that time, the opportunities for women were not a lot, okay? Especially within the Catholic Church. You know, it was either you joined a religious order or whatever. And so I had been getting information from the Christian Appalachian Project and decided that I was going to go down there and volunteer, and I was accepted. I volunteered for about 2.5 years, and then I became an employee. I was a director of one of their child development centers. And in the meantime, when I moved out from being a volunteer to employee, I had my own place. I had 2 bedrooms, so one of my teachers needed a place to stay, so she stayed with me. And she was interested in becoming a sister. So to make a long story short, she's now married, has grown kids, grandkids, and I've been a sister for over 40 years.
You flip-flopped.
Yes. Yes.
What was it that drew you into being a sister from that point? Like, was it just your experiences to that point, or?
Well, you know, years ago when I would babysit my sister's kids, I would drive out, and it was out in Wexford before Wexford was developed. And I would pass this place where there was a hill, and I would imagine myself, I thought, if I'm going to join in religious life, it's going to be different. I'm going to join, and these people, these sisters, will be involved with the local people. They'll be serving the people. They'll be out there amidst the people, okay? And so I had this vision. And so the Lord had planted that seed many years ago. And I ended up, sure enough, where we're located now, the monastery, it's up on top of a mountain. The sisters are still involved in service to the community and larger community. And so, yeah, that's how I got there. It was a seed that was planted many years ago as a young person. Yeah. And I also give credit not only to my family. I come from a family of 8, and I was the youngest, okay? And then I was taught by the Benedictine sisters in grade school and high school. My sister was a Benedictine with the Bakerstown Benedictine sisters, but that's not where God led me. He led me to Kentucky.
Wow.
Yeah.
And not just like the city of, a big city in Kentucky. You're in the deep country. So you went from the city of Pittsburgh to deep country.
Right.
What was that transition like?
Quite different. I can remember my friends saying, you know, if you need to come home, let us know, you know. And when I went down to volunteer, it was quite different then. You had a lot of homes that had what they call straight pipes. So in other words, they didn't have real decent plumbing sewage system, and so the straight pipes, you know, went right into the streams, the local streams and stuff like that. But I think what really grabbed me the most was the authenticity of the people that lived there. And so that is probably what got me there. I thought, oh, I'm going to stay for 2 years, then I'm going back to Pittsburgh, you know. But God had other plans, and what made the difference, I think, is, you know, we talk, you know, we have our cell phones and all that kind of stuff, but we realize the importance of sitting just like us, telling our stories and hearing the stories of the people from there was authentic. And so I felt drawn there to continue to live there and be part of the people there. Yes.
So folks from Pittsburgh don't really know what Appalachia means. What does that mean? How would you describe it? And then talk about some of the stories that you've heard through your experiences there.
All right. What I would, Appalachia, most people might know, might not, but Appalachia includes 13 states. The only state that's totally in Appalachia is West Virginia. And what we're talking about is a chain of mountains. So they even come up here through Pennsylvania. And so Pittsburgh is part of Appalachia. And anyways, I forgot what I was going to say now.
Yeah, no. So like, what is it that makes Appalachia Appalachia?
Okay.
You know, when people think about it, and then the stories. I want to hear about some of the
All
stories
right.
that
So, what makes Appalachia so special? And there's some of that here in Pittsburgh are the stories, but also the history. I mean, I've talked to people, I was sharing with Amy a little bit earlier that there are people who live in those mountains, who live in those communities that can trace their ancestry back to the 1700s when the area was first discovered, especially in the little town of David, where I was executive director for St. Vincent Mission, is one of the places where Daniel Boone wintered. Wow. And so there were salt springs there. So he stayed there. And like I said, some of those people can trace their ancestries way back to then. And heirloom seeds, even back to then. You know, you have more varieties of tomatoes and beans and stuff than you can imagine. But it's the stories of the people and their resilience that has really helped me to understand. You know, there's a little picture back here from St. John's Bible, and it says on there, choose life. From the scripture, choose life. Isn't that what we're about? That we get the opportunity to choose life and to see how God moves in each of our lives. You know, I don't care where you're from or who you are, you know, that the story of God's presence in our life, if we listen, St. Benedict says, listen with the ear of your heart. That's in the prologue of the Rule of St. Benedict. Listen with the ear of our hearts. And sometimes I think in this day and age, we lose that. And we have to get that back. Yeah. We have to get that back, yeah.
So how have you been listening in this community? And I think before there's some folks that might not understand that in Appalachia, large parts of it are hit with deep poverty because of access. So it's deep rural areas that might not have access to the same types of things. There was mining that was happening all across Appalachia at one point that then stopped, and then those towns began to die. So what some folks don't necessarily understand is just how deeply impoverished, not all of it, but like parts of Appalachia are.
Right. Well, you know, there's a saying amongst the people in Kentucky that when you get to Winchester, there's a wall. And some people, it used to be said, they wished that part, which is in Appalachia, were a different state because of the poverty that existed and all that. But what we find is that people continue to build that resilience. For example, you talked about the mining. The mining, yes, they provided jobs. They put food on the table, the companies, okay, because of the local people. And there's so many people from outside the region that were brought in during the bust of coal mining, okay? So you have all these different communities. You might have Italian, Hungarian, or whatever communities there. So there's a lot of Scotch-Irish as well. And so a lot of the music from that area came from the Scotch-Irish, okay? And the other thing is, when you were talking about the poverty, if you can imagine the Appalachian Mountains, especially where we're at, because we're at the foothills, as an egg carton turned upside down.
Wow.
In other words, you've got to go through this mountain and this valley to get to the next one. And that is so true for so many. So a lot of resources that, say for example, that you have here, it's just not available down there. Talk about malls and those kinds of things. We don't have a mall as we do, say, like the Northway Mall. I don't even know if it's called that anymore, but we don't have that, you know. As far as grocery stores, there are some communities, you might have heard of the term food desert, and that means that you have to travel more than 10, 15 miles to get to a grocery store, not just your little mom and pop grocery stores, but to a big one. Now, sometimes what has happened is each community had their churches, they had their school, they had places where the community could gather. And then as things have changed over the years, because the coal mining has pulled out, a lot of those communities have died. The schools have closed and stuff, but you find people, like for instance, the Hemp Hill Community Center in Letcher County, or you think of the Maytown Center in Maytown, where they have taken over the schools and made them into community centers so that people can come and celebrate. They can worship together, they share meals together, and when there's something that they feel is unjust and needs attention, they know they can go to the community center and find the support that they'll need. Yeah.
I'm going to ask a question that's going to be obvious to you.
Okay.
But it might not be so obvious to someone
Sure.
that's listening. If, the mine's left and there's not access to certain things just because of the landscape, why don't people move?
Good question. This was probably over 10 years ago. I know it was over 10 years ago. We were looking to have a service put in over at St. Vincent Mission. And there was also somebody there from the mining company. And so at that time, I was a very angry person when it came to mining because I could see what happened. The mining companies came in, they gave employment to people that put food on the table, but when they got what they wanted, they left. And so the people were kind of left with, what do we do now? And there was a gentleman that said to me, well, the people should just pick up and move. But these people have roots there. Their families, generation after generation has been there. There is something sacred about Appalachia. And not just Eastern Kentucky, but other Appalachian communities. Their music is very sacred. Their churches are so important. But it's about community, and it's about telling stories. Yeah.
So what are the things that Appalachia has gotten right, like that people don't know about?
Okay.
Adding on to community being really important, church being really important. What are some of the things that they've got going for them?
Okay. One of the things, and I think I might have said this, is their resilience. To give you an example, in 2022, we had one of many floods that really devastated a lot of communities. I mean, you're talking about communities where the water was 8 foot out of the banks of whatever tributary, whatever river might have been there, small rivers and stuff. A lot of people got flooded, totally devastated. You saw cars, house, trailers, literally split in half and moved down, a mile from where the trailer originally sat. So the resilience of the people, I think, really speaks a lot to me and makes that place so special. You don't meet a stranger down there. They can say to you, "Oh, you're not from around here, are you?" Of course, they pick up my Pittsburgh accent, which I've never, my dialect, which I've never lost. And I say, "Yes, you're right. But you know what? This is my home now. This is where I live." I think of the mining communities also, once they left, for instance, in David, they left in the 60s. And it wasn't until the mid-90s that they took out what they call a coal tipple, where they process the coal and stuff, until then. And so that was there. It was like a scar on the land, But it finally got taken out. But even to this day, you can find areas where the mining companies have not been there for years, and the water still runs orange from the chemicals that have come from the processes that they use to clean the coal and to get the coal out. We had a big slurry spill back in 2000 in Martin County that just devastated, and that was worse than, for those who might know a little bit about the Valdez up in wherever, I don't even remember where it was, but it was a worse spill than that oil tanker, the oil that it had spilled. And it took years to get that water. It devastated communities. And even before that, in the 60s, there was a place, Buffalo Creek, that was totally, I don't know how many lives were lost because of it. And so, yes, mining at that time was very important to the economics of the whole United States and beyond. But there's a responsibility, I think, that the coal companies just ignored. It's like, it's like an absentee land order. I'll rent you this place and stuff, but I ain't going to keep it up. And if I do make some changes, then I'm going to increase your rent. So the coal companies, they got what they wanted and they moved back. They were absentee. Most of the coal companies in that area were not from Kentucky. They were from outside the state. Yeah.
So as we're getting ready to land the plane, I got a couple more questions.
Sure.
One, you've talked about the impact of coal mining on the earth.
Yes.
And Pope Francis but like one of the Catholic social teachings that was sort of authored by Pope Francis.
Laudato Si.
You had made reference to some other folks talking about Laudato Si type of work before that.
Yes. I think we're talking about the Catholic Committee of Appalachia, which has been in existence for over 50 years. And one of the things we were talking about, how important the stories are, and what people like, I wasn't part of the first one because that was back in '75, but religious sisters and priests went out and got the people's stories. What is it like to live in Appalachia? So that first letter was called "This Land is Home to Me." And then, I forget the years, I think it was 20 years later, it was in '75. So then the next one was in '95, came out, "The Telling Takes Us Home." And that was a continuation of, okay, here's where we were when we heard the stories of the people back in '75. Here we are in 1995. What's the same and what has changed? What has deteriorated and what has become better? Yeah. And so it's all done very poetically. The next one that was written was in 2015, which was right before Laudato Si came out. And it's called I made a mistake. The second one was called, the first one was called This Land is Home to Me. The second one was called, oh my gosh, it's a shame I can't think of it.
I know.
Okay, so anyways, and the last one was called The Telling Takes Us Home. And there again, the stories of the people and the changes that have been made. And it talked about the degradation of the environment and the what we have done to God's creation. And it talks about people coming to be in places of crucifixion. To go to places of crucifixion and show the resurrection, be the resurrection. And these people are living that life. They are places of crucifixion, whether it be from the flooding. They even did a lot of logging at the very beginning of the statehood of Kentucky, and then went into the coal mining and stuff. So there was a lot of destruction of God's cathedral in many ways. And so now Appalachia is continuing to build. There are so many nonprofits that are around that are doing those kind, teaching job skills, bringing communities together to say, you have a voice. Just because somebody says, well, this is the way it's going to be, if it's unjust, if it's not right, then let's do something as a community to change that projection of what they're putting out there. Yeah. And even our own community, the very first pastoral, This Land is Home to Me, there was a line in there that said, we hope that people of religion or of institutions can create places of prayer and reflection for those who minister in Appalachia. And so that's how our monastery was founded. We became a place of prayer and reflection. Yes.
It's been a pleasure sitting and just listening to your story. You talked about how important stories are. One of the reasons that we've connected is because we're hoping to be able to take students from LaRoche University and go to Kentucky and serve and just be a part of the people and hear their stories. And what was the music? The something picking?
Oh, front porch picking.
Front porch picking.
Yes.
That sounds perfectly country.
Yeah, and it is. I think what happened is these communities that I was talking about, they had their schools, they had their churches. Whenever there was they'd get together. But a thing that they did, because there weren't things to go out and do, they sat around on their porches and played their music.
Yeah.
Yep.
I'm looking forward to going.
Well, we are looking forward to having you, and like myself, when I first went to Kentucky, I thought, I'm going to fix those people. No, it's not about that. It's about, as we said, listening to the stories and how God is so present in each one of us. I don't care where we come from. But if we listen to the stories, I think of a young lady that I knew when she was younger, and now she's in her 50s, but her and her husband were plagued with addiction, okay? So much so that they made the meth in their home. This person lost her eyesight. From using the meth, she lost the roof of her mouth. 5 years ago, I saw her sitting on the side of the road, and I said, what are you doing there? She goes, my husband said that if I'm still here when he comes home, I'm going to kill you. And so I said, get in the car, picked her up. She's over 5 years clean now and working and doing so much better. Yes, but it's being able to listen to the story, to sit with them and know that nobody is expendable. We're all, one of our sisters said, we're all beloved children of God. Yeah.
I think we'll end right there.
All right.
Thank you so much for your time. I appreciate you.
All right.
And we'll have to do this again.
Sounds good.
Part 2.
All right. God bless.
God
Thank
bless
you.